let's start with something easy. Everybody just take a minute and think about something unfair, okay? Just go ahead, take 5 seconds, just anything unfair, you got it? Now, I want you to turn to your neighbor and tell them. Just go ahead, rant about it, you'll feel better. No, seriously, tell them right now, I'll wait. Yeah, okay, so like I said, that was easy, right? Like nobody has a hard time coming up with what's unfair about life. Like whether you talked about sports and how refs always seem like they're like working for the other team and games are always rigged, or school and how teachers sometimes legitimately have favorites and they treat those favorites that way and you're not one of the favorites, so that's unfair. Or your parents and how it feels like they have higher expectations for you than any of your friends' parents or your siblings. Oh my goodness, like let's just get talking about our siblings, how their life is so much easier than yours in a million ways, and yes, it's unfair. Or maybe you talked about anybody you describe with and what I mean by that is anybody who's smarter, richer, prettier, stronger, popular, and how unfair it is that they're naturally something more than you. And see, when something is unfair, we don't like it, do we? Nobody's like, oh my goodness, I am so glad my sister gets away with all the things that I get grounded for. Or, oh man, what a blessing that I am literally less smart or less funny or less good looking than that guy or that girl. Like nobody likes unfairness. And if I'm honest, I think that's the problem with this series that we're doing. See, we've been talking about how forgiveness and forgiving people when they're sorry and when they're not sorry. And a lot of times forgiveness is one of those things that just feels unfair, right? So when the idea comes up of talking about forgiveness or forgiving someone else, it kind of feels like things get unbalanced. It feels like the scale is tilted in their favor. Like they're getting away with something and it's one-sided, and all of a sudden we're supposed to just forgive them for that, and that seems unfair. It feels unfair to me. And it feels like they took something from us and we aren't getting paid back. And maybe you've heard the phrase, they owe you an apology, right? Like they need to pay you back. But if you're like me, you're like, apology? They owe me more than apology. Like they owe me way more than that. They need to grovel, they need to go public, they need to take back what they said about me. They need to go around to everybody they spread a rumor about me to and tell them that it was completely untrue. Now, you might not use the word unfair when we talk about forgiveness because it feels bigger than that. This isn't the same as when you're a kid and someone knocks down your Lego tower. It's a way more serious situation when somebody talks bad about you or talks bad about you behind your back. Somebody lies about you and gets you in trouble. A friend doesn't invite you to something, people are hanging out and they just leave you out. A friend starts dating the guy or girl you already had a thing with, like that's crazy. A family member says something hurtful to you. A parent just takes off or is uninvolved in areas of your life, or a teacher makes you feel stupid, or a coach overlooks you every single time and leaves you on the bench. And after getting hurt like that, you're supposed to just let it go, right? Nothing happens to them. They get no payback. They have no consequences. Maybe not even the apology they owe you. It's just supposed to be forgiveness on our end and that's it. Like, how is that okay? Well, that question is why the story we're looking at today is so important, because it's recorded in a historical document written by a guy named Matthew who knew Jesus personally, and that document was included in the New Testament portion of the Bible. And in the part of the chapter that we're looking at, Peter asked Jesus a question about forgiveness and how often we should forgive. And so Jesus, as he often did, answers by telling a story. And I think this story speaks directly to the questions we all ask, even today, when it comes to the people in our lives who are sorry and the people in our lives who are not sorry. So Jesus starts the story like this. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven, this is what God honors and recognizes. This is walking God's way. That's the kingdom of heaven, is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And as he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. So this guy's in trouble, got it? Since he was not able to pay, so this man was not able to pay the king, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. That's what all of us would have done in that situation. And the servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. Whew, wow. See, it's like, man, that is powerful right there. So Jesus tells this story about a servant who borrows a lot of gold. And it would be like saying he borrowed $1 billion or something like that and can't pay it back. And his boss is mad, as you would imagine. But then he realizes his servant has no way of paying him back. And instead of saying, sorry, you'll just have to work until you pay me back, or I'm going to hurt you like you hurt me, I'm gonna make your family pay, he just cancels the debt, free and clear. It's like poof, and it all goes away. And the servant probably felt pretty good about it. I mean, he's probably dancing in the streets. I would too, because here's what I know about me, and it's probably also true about you. I'm okay with how unfair forgiveness is when I'm the one being forgiven. I'm okay when things are unfair if it works in my favor. When I hurt my mom and she lets it go, or when I owe somebody an apology and they're like, hey, don't worry about it, I forgive you. Or when I talk about somebody behind their back and they're like, you know what, don't sweat it, I've done it too. The unfairness of it, man, that doesn't bother me at all. So then Jesus continues. The story's not done. We're like, man, that's awesome. Let's all walk away, but Jesus keeps going. He says this next. But when that servant, that's the servant who was just forgiven a huge debt, okay, that same person, when he went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him, all right? This is reality show type stuff here, people. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged with him, be patient with me and I will pay it back. Sounds familiar, right? But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debts. Now, when the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master, this is the one who had previously forgiven the debt, called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I canceled all of that debt of yours because you begged me to. Now, shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? So the same servant who owes his master like $1 billion has someone who owes him money. It's just not a lot, not as much, just some coins, way less than what he owed the master, and yet he refuses to give the guy a break. So when the master gets word, you can bet he's mad. He is angry. He had been unfairly good to his servant. And how did that same servant repay him? By being incredibly harsh to someone else. And so Jesus ends the story, and now everyone's probably frustrated who's listening to it. Jesus ends the story by saying, in anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. Okay, so that's like, wow, that gets pretty extreme in its language. And torture, connecting it to the way God treats us, is that what we're saying is gonna happen? No. In the very end, Jesus connects the dots for us. This isn't a story about a guy and his servant and some bags of gold. It's not a story about people being tortured in prison or anything like that. It's a story about us. It is a story about human beings who are in messy relationships with each other, especially those who follow Jesus and have been treated unfairly in the best possible way by being forgiven of everything we've done and would ever do. I think Jesus was saying to his followers, what are you doing? Yes, forgiving your brother for that one thing he did, sure, that feels unfair, but I forgave you for all the things you've ever done, all the things you'll ever do, all the things you've done in secret, all the things you've thought about people, all the things that you shouldn't have done and you didn't do and you should have. I didn't make you pay that debt. You couldn't have paid me anyway. Instead, I forgave you times 1 billion. So when you refuse to forgive someone else for one thing or for two things, yeah, that's a problem. See, I don't think Jesus told this story just to be like, see how bad you are? You're all jerks, you won't forgive each other. I think he wanted us to see the situation clearly because he knew it would change how we respond. He knew when we see forgiveness the way he sees it, when we see the amount in which we have been forgiven, you and me, it will be easier for us to forgive what we're owed by other people. See, it's simple. Forgiven people forgive. Forgiven people forgive. See, I love this story because the truth is, you couldn't pay the debt you owed your Heavenly Father. So he did it for you. He sent his son to pay that debt for you. In the same way, the people who owe you, they can't pay you back. They can't like fully restore to you what was taken from you. They can apologize, but they can't give you back the time you lost thinking about what they did, or the confidence you lost when they hurt you or said something about you, or the reputation you lost when they lied about you, or the energy that you lost just trying to get over it, the peace you lost when they did what they did to you. Saying sorry is nice, it's awesome, but it isn't going to pay back what they owe you. You know this, you've experienced this, not by a long shot. But when we choose not to forgive, the people we're hurting is ourselves. Because you remember the last lines of the story? Jesus said the master handed the servant over to be tortured and then gives us a warning. Just like the servant, when we refuse to forgive, it's like kind of torturous to us. Like we're in prison, not physically, but we still suffer. It's like we get stuck. We keep thinking about it, reliving it, having imaginary fights and imaginary conversations in our mind about it. And whatever it is, the thing that we refuse to forgive, it's hurting us. Man, it is torturing us. And you've probably been there before. See, this should be news to us. The person who hurt you, they're not carrying the debt they owe you. You are. They're not even thinking about it as much as you are. They're not reliving it as much as you are. They're not hurting over it like you are. They made that comment and didn't even think about it. They moved on with their lives. And you're like, I know, that's what I'm so frustrated about. But they're not carrying that debt. And I think Jesus is saying, not only is forgiveness the right thing to do, it is the right thing for you. See, when forgiven people forgive, it sets both people free. It lets both people move on. Is it unfair? Yeah, absolutely it's unfair. But in light of what we've been forgiven, well, not really. And in light of what it gives us in return, this freedom from being tortured in our minds, it's totally worth it. It's like a win times 2. But how do we do this? Like, what does forgiving look like when we know it's going to be unfair, but we just decide we want to forgive anyway for our sake, because we've been forgiven so much, because we want to move on? I think we can begin by doing exactly what the master did at the beginning of Jesus' story. We give up on payback. We just throw it out the window. We just drop it. Forgiveness looks like giving up on whatever you're doing to try and make things fair again, to get justice, to get, make somebody pay back, whatever you're doing to even the score. It means giving up on the trash talk. When somebody hurts us, it's tempting to tell anybody who will listen anything that will make them look bad and make sure everybody knows that what they did is terrible and how bad they really are. And it seems fair to trash talk them, especially if they trash talked you, right? Or judging. When we're ticked off, it's easy to think about all the other stuff that's bad about them, to tell ourselves or everybody else all the reasons they not only did something bad, but why they are a bad person, or just being rude or being a jerk. If we're honest, when someone's been, rude or unkind to us, it seems completely fair to act the same way back to them. And sometimes we do it in obvious ways, like blocking them in the hallway or keying their car. But seriously, I don't think anybody really does that. But it's usually more subtle ways. It's a look you give other people when they walk in the room. It's an innocent but snarky response anytime they talk. It's screenshotting something that they post online and sending it to your friends with your own comments added and making fun of them. See, let's just be honest about all of that kind of stuff. None of that seems too bad compared to what they did to you, right? But at the same time, aren't these all like just ways we try to get payback, make things fair again, even the score? And I think Jesus' point was, that's not gonna happen. Not forgiving does not make it better. Jesus has let our debts go. We have the power. Because of that, we have the power to let go of what others owe us. The Apostle Paul put it this way: bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. And then he says this: forgive as the Lord forgave you. How does the Lord forgive you and I when we mess up? Completely. Without us paying back, even though it cost him so much. And because of what he did when he sent Jesus, you and I can do the same. Because forgiven people forgive. When we understand how much we've been forgiven for, when we understand that our $1 billion debt has been canceled, then we can forgive the $100 debts of people around us. See, if you're here today and you've been hurt by someone, and probably all of you have, I get it. This is not easy. I'm not trying to say that it is. If you aren't following Jesus or have never experienced total forgiveness that he offers you, it may even sound insane. But for those of us who have experienced what Jesus has done for us, we've had debts that we can't pay completely canceled. I think it's so helpful to see how our debt compares to the one we're trying to forgive, how the debt that God has forgiven us for compares to these little debts around us that we're trying to forgive. And I want you, as you leave, to think about someone who has hurt you or made you angry. Don't talk about them out loud, okay? We're not gonna ask you to name them in small group or something like that. But when you think of that person, I want you to ask yourself something. What do they owe you? What would it take for you to feel like things are fair again? And is it even possible? And I'm guessing that it's probably not. And that's okay, because your Heavenly Father has set the best example for how to forgive when it's unfair. He doesn't want you to feel tortured. He doesn't want you to waste your time or energy trying to make things fair again. Instead, he'll help you see that when you've been forgiven more than you can ever pay back, it'll give you the courage to do the same for someone else. Because remember this, okay? Forgiven people forgive. When we understand how much we've been forgiven for, then we can cancel these small debts around us.